Hello. So, guys, what I want to chat to you about today is a topic that relates to how we walk through this three-dimensional construct which we call our lives, how we go about our day-to-day practices if we are in pursuit of a healing modality, so to speak. If you are someone like myself who has experienced an enormous emotional trauma, what we call a mental illness or psychiatric pathology or emotional breakdown or nervous breakdown, we can language it whatever way you want to. It is you will understand what I'm referring to. It is a daily challenge to navigate these emotional experiences, which the mainstream media or the colloquial terminologies used would be things like anxiety or depression, or however you want to language it, and it is a pandemic. It is a global phenomenon. If we think about, if you're aware of the amount of suicides among young people, among older people, and if we look at post-traumatic stress in our folk that have been working in the combat forces and the military forces that come back, especially in the United States, the prevalence there or incidence is extremely high. I think it's every 20 minutes a Marine or vet is taking their own life. So the war is a mental war, and that's not to undermine organic or physical pathology at all. That is very much there, and it is in the forefront, and science is dealing with that in terms of pharmacotherapy and medications to treat cancers and organic pathology as well. This video, though, is about my friends and my family, and these are the people that are struggling emotionally and psychologically, and those of you who are drawn to the message and have never experienced psychological pain at all as a chronic disease. It doesn't matter. What this video is about is I propose a mental discipline as a path to healing. And you might think, now, what on earth does that mean? What is a mental discipline as such? Well, I take my inspiration from the fact that the physical body certainly has no capacity for growth other than increased size from infancy to adulthood. It's definitely the essence of the human is a mental one, is an awareness one, and growth and development. If we want to talk about healing of a person's mind, is a psychological healing. And when I say that, I'm referring to the integration of the I know mind, as I've been saying in this series of lectures or videos. The I know mind is fractured and it is distracted in so many different areas and into so many different regions, and it's become invested in so many beliefs as it's grown up. And I speak for myself and for everyone listening. I'm sure you are aware of your own conditioning in your own culture, your own tribal culture, so to speak. You know, growing up, what is right, what is wrong, what is appropriate, what isn't appropriate behavior, and so on. And then if you face a crisis like I have in my life, and a psychological crisis, an emotional crisis, all of these come tumbling down. And you begin to question absolutely everything. And this is a good thing, in my opinion. It's the beginning of the transformation. And in this video, I want to propose a discipline, though, because the mind will just it needs an anchor, and especially if it's going through a storm. And that anchor is a discipline that you can find through a mental application, which is reliant on truth. Now, for truth to be truth, we need a benchmark. And this is not negotiable. This cannot be negotiable, because then truth wouldn't be truth. So the benchmark that I use is God. And this has very little to do with religion. When we speak about God, when I speak about God, I'm referring to the Creator. And if we talk about the attributes of this God that I speak of, which every single religion on the planet refers to, if they are monotheistic, meaning one God, believing in one God, they will say that this God is all powerful, all seeing, and all these prepositions that apply, all loving, all forgiving, absolute perfection. There is no mistake within this belief or within this construct, if language doesn't come close to describing it. But that would be the benchmark of truth. There is no untruth within it. There is no mistake within it. There is no failure within it. There's no darkness, no lies, no deception. It is perfection, ultimate perfection. And so that's what I've come to understand through this pain of my own walk, that I needed that benchmark. Otherwise, there would be no foundation on which to start a process, begin a process of healing. And my step forward was to embrace because of my cultural background, was Judeo-Christian, and so initially all those belief systems just fell apart, and I couldn't even embrace that. I couldn't open that Bible. I couldn't go to those churches because of the fear and the terror that had gripped my mind. And some of you might understand it. Some of you might be completely confused by it. And all you need to understand is that the framework within which I had been brought up collapsed completely for me, and therefore it then represented a construct of terror. So I abandoned all of those belief systems and began to look for answers wherever I could find them, and I was driven by a very basic need, and that was to end my own suffering. And so over the years, and I was 19 at the time, and I'm now in my 40s, late 40s, over the years I've come to see that there are no mistakes, and that Jesus was indeed exceptionally advanced, and that the human form he took was his last life form, and that the precepts that he preached and the parables that he preached were messages that many of the folk at the time couldn't grasp and didn't understand. And like anything, even these videos, can only be pointers to the I don't know mind. And the grace in that was that the guidance all the time was leading me and others that suffer to the mercy and the grace that's found in that stillness, where the mind that thinks it is suffering and experiences the torment within that gently and peacefully comes to a stillness that's so innocent and innocuous, like a child, just in its beingness, it's just there doing what it does, and that would be enough. I was misled by my I know mind in the depths of my suffering, that there would be some huge and miraculous turnaround at some point for me, and I begged and prayed for it repeatedly, that God would just come and through some miraculous turn of events, my mind would be restored and my memory and all the signs and symptoms of breakdown would just vanish. And it didn't. It kind of just became a gentle evolution, to describe the process, into a glorious, in its subtlety, experience of wisdom and understanding. And that's a process, and so that I can sit and articulate something here now, and that's possibly the only reason it had to be that way. So it's important in this video to relay that there is a discipline, and it still applies to today. And if you notice, I'm a huge fan, if that is something, of Byron Katie's work, because it takes the I know mind and it puts it up against inquiry. If that's a discipline that speaks to you, that's appropriate and can be applied. And because religion has failed the world, religion is rules and regulations, and it didn't serve me, and I speak for myself. It didn't serve me. It brought enormous fear and guilt for me. What serves is understanding that the mind needs a discipline, and that's not discipline with a rod, but that's discipline with understanding that the ego identification and the ego mind wants to recognize an individual existence. It wants to be an I, and that I is vulnerable to suffering, because ultimately it identifies with this physical body, and that's a terrible story. It's not a good ending, because the body doesn't survive, and the ego wants to create drama and fear and terror, and so this world that we apparently are living in becomes a very scary experience. And so the training that's involved, if there is training and discipline, is the training I've been sharing in these videos, and that is the introduction of the I don't know mind. Let it educate the ego, allow it to educate the ego mind, the I know mind, and it gently opens up like a flower. It just gently blossoms, and it's so gentle and subtle. It's so sweet in its nature. And as you sense it, and as it blossoms up against this almost rigid construct of I am this and I am that, this rigid construct begins to soften towards it, and begins to understand, and begins to grow in wisdom, and say, but you know what, this is okay. It begins to trust. So a relationship begins to form between the two, and this is the love story. And I couldn't have known that that was going to unfold at 19 in my pain and my suffering. And so I just wanted to share that with this video, is that there is a discipline. And if it is a discipline, it would simply be that, to allow the innocence and the childlikeness of that beautiful spirit, that Christ-like mind, to express itself in stillness. Take care.